So let's recap and talk about Alone Season 5, Episode 4, Mongolia's Wrath. It starts out at day 11 of this particular season, and there's 7 people remaining. In fact, no one actually leaves during this whole episode. The focus, it seems like early on in this episode, is shelter. You know, what type of shelter are people building, how robust and how insulated it is. And there's this storm that's coming. And before the storm and during the storm, you get to really kind of see and get a good feel of where these contestants are at in terms of in their stage of building a shelter. For example, Dave's shelter is not very robust at all. It only has, well, part of the shelter finished. There's big gaping holes and gaps. There's a missing wall. Basically, it's not very good at all. It's not impressive. Let me just say that. I was a little let down when I saw that. The roof is not reinforced. It's just a mess. So he's going to be in big trouble if he doesn't get that built up more. Larry's shelter is also not very good. I think it's a little bit better than Dave's, but it's not very good in terms of keeping rain out. So I think that he needs to work on that as well. Britt's shelter, it just seems like his was really thin and weak. It was flapping around. Things are like pieces of his shelter is falling off during the storm. Not very impressive. Brooks' shelter is also kind of thin. Didn't seem to be very robust. I was kind of hoping a little more from her in some ways, but I know that it takes a lot of energy. So I can totally understand not wanting to go all out on this super heavy duty shelter. But at some point, though, if you're really going to want to last a long time, especially when the snow hits in Mongolia, you're going to have probably more than what these individuals have going for them. Now, on day 12, the day after the storm, and I want to say first off, before I go on anymore, the so-called big storm, the wrath of Mongolia, I'm sure it was a bad storm, but I mean, I kind of felt like that maybe they hyped that storm up a bit, especially in episode 3. I just think it was a little overdone. I was kind of expecting like a really intense storm that was going to demolish or maybe even injure people. Like I thought really bad things were going to happen, but not much at all happened. So that was a little bit weak, in terms of, the setup and then nothing happening. But in day 12, though, Dave, he sees and identifies really 2 widowmakers. I think he says there's like 1, but he cuts down 2 trees and there's 2 dead trees out there. So there's really 2 that are right next to his camp that had the potential to do great damage and really hurt him or even kill him. And he cuts it down. Of course, while he's doing it, he says that he's doing it improperly because he's not taking down his old shelter and not trying to protect his tarp and blah, blah, blah. But he goes ahead and cuts them down and luckily they didn't fall on his shelter. Dave is a very likable guy, but sometimes he's just a little bit over the edge. He's a little hard to take too seriously, and I'm sure that's probably his objective. But I just think that if he was a little bit more organized, maybe he would get better results. I don't know. But also on day 12, you have Randy. Now, Randy is something else. I'm very impressed with his cabin. And he works on chinking the cabin at this particular point, and he's just doing a great job. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome. And so I think he's also I think he moves into the cabin as well then. And then it switches over to Britt, which he finds a poisonous frog, and then he kind of plays with it. You know how there's certain personalities when you watch shows that you don't vibe well with? Like, you don't wish them any ill, but you just don't get along with like their personality. Like, you just don't understand them. For me personally, Britt is one of those people. I just don't vibe well with them. But and there's only one other person, on this particular season that I don't really connect with. So I think, for the most part, I really do understand, or at least I feel some connection with most of the contestants. So that's pretty good. Britt, though, comes from a totally different world than the world that I live in. And then also going on a little further, he sees that deer, crossing the river, and then I think he makes 3 attempts roughly, and trying to shoot it with an arrow. He misses, and the deer escapes. Then it moves on to Larry. He gets his first fish, and does his fish dance. Now, this is kind of where a lot of people in a lot of forums. Now, I don't really typically talk a lot about the forums that I read, but there's a few running posts on Reddit, and Reddit has a lot of contributors when it comes to this show, to my surprise. But there's lots of different opinions, and when it comes to Larry on Reddit, a lot of people say that maybe he's a little off. Emotionally, he has these highs and lows. Maybe he has bipolar, or I don't know. I think that some people are just a little more intense than others, and I think that when you're hungry, hunger, it can mess with you in different ways that it may not mess with others. So, stress is one of those things that it's kind of a custom kind of response. So I try not to judge anybody on here at all. But I can kind of start to see a little bit what people are talking about. But for a long time, though, I've watched Larry on his own personal YouTube channel, and I've talked to him once, and I followed him very closely, when he did his previous season. And I don't think that he probably has any type of serious imbalance. I think he's just very expressive. He's a very emotional kind of guy. And when you talk to him in, outside of this whole contest, you see that he's a very mellow person, and we all have, demons in our closet. So, that's just how it is. And so he does his fish dance. It is a little comical, I can't say that I would probably do that myself, but maybe I would, though, if I was starving and I really wanted to win and I got this fish. It makes a big deal, but, it really has great outcomes. But now the question is for Larry is, should he have kept on fishing? Now he gets that fish, and according to how the show plays out, he gets that fish, and then he goes, man, he's like, this is my meal. I'm going to have to go. This is time to eat. And, I'm going to have this stew and all this. But if he just caught one, maybe there's other fish right there. So now, of course, if you're that hungry, maybe all you can think about is just getting that fish in your belly. But I kept on thinking in my mind, okay, what about trying for at least another fish? Just at least one more, or maybe spending at least a little bit more time out there trying to catch a fish. But anyways, that's what I got thinking. Then it goes to day 14, and Randy is finishing up his fireplace. And he's using the clay and the rock from the bank of the river. He talks about that he's getting some of the best clay, though, kind of deep into that bank. He's having to really dig into the bank, and he's getting some good stuff. And I'd have to say that Randy is very impressive. Once again, he has the best shelter by far. It's just, there's no comparison. And so far that I've seen, there's no comparison. He has a very good shelter. He's very, very advanced, very impressive. And then it goes right to day 15, and then Britt calls a chipmunk a furry bastard, and then throws rocks at it, and then I think a piece of wood, and he misses it, and all this stuff. But once again, maybe you vibe really well with Britt. I just don't. Day 15, Dave is back in front of the camera, and he's talking about this black woodpecker, and that he's kind of just not really enjoying killing animals, and he's having this dilemma, and he was thinking about, at least there was somewhat of a consideration about killing the woodpecker for food, but he decides to let it live. And then I quote, I don't hunt to kill, I hunt to eat. and then just, very soon after that, he kills a red squirrel with a bow and arrow up in a tree. And then he has this dilemma, like he's not that excited or happy about the kill. And it wasn't a very clean kill. I mean, the animal was still alive, very much so, when it got hit with the arrow, and he was upset about that. And so I think down the road, at least in the next episode or in the next 2 episodes, I think we're going to have to see some type of resolution about how Dave is going to work through this. Is he going to continue to, because he's been doing very well up until now, harvesting animals with a bow. It's very impressive. But is there going to be a wall that he's just going to say, okay, I've had enough, because he doesn't like doing it? And so we'll see. And then Jess, which hasn't had a lot of time yet, in this episode, a lot of, screen time at all. But Jess is put in there at the very end, and it is pretty comical. There's a moose in the background making some noises, I guess it's during mating season. He thinks it's a moose during mating season doing a mating call to a female. And he's funny, but then it's real sad. I like Jess a lot. He's cool as hell. And he gets a fish on his trout line, but at the very end, right before he gets to the edge of the bank, it gets off the hook. He loses it. And he's just like, stunned. Like he's just in a moment of like shock and awe. Like, what just happened? Like, I just had a meal that I really desperately needed that would carry me through many more days. And he's in a dry spell. It's pretty bad too, actually. He's literally starving. He needs food. And he's even talking about how much it's affecting him, which is not a very good sign. So, Jess, I really wish the best for you, brother. I hope you can get some calories, get some protein, get some carbs going on. I know that, eating just small things that you forage is not going to be enough. So that's concerning. Episode 5 sneak peeks basically kind of reveals that hunger is becoming a bigger issue for more people than just Jess. And the moral dilemma, especially, I think it kind of is more pointing toward Dave about how to resolve the dilemma of, should I continue to be a contestant, even though I don't want to give in, but I don't also want to kill more animals. So that's kind of the recap and some of my thoughts. I think it's a really good episode. I mean, it's one of my more favorite episodes because the way that it's portrayed, the way that it's shown, you can really see and get a good feel, like a really good, honest, face-to-face feel of the emotions, the state of mind. And basically, you kind of just feel like you're almost there. Like, I don't know how they did this, but they did a good job. And so I just want to point that out as well. So what do you think about this? Alone, Season 5, Episode 4, Mongolia's Wrath. Thanks for watching.